made those. I think he just made it up. He just had it all over here and just did it.
See, that's the problem, that's,
Yeah, because we could do it all, but the lighting is because he had all of that.
I'm worried about setting up the set, because
No, no
I
problem.
don't do physical labor.
Oh, we can do all that.
Yeah, okay.
I mean, we built it all from scratch to start with anyway, so. All the boards are labeled somewhere.
You're willing to wear a red, right?
Why?
You know, for
Effect.
apprentices.
Maybe that'll just give me encouragement to regrow it.
We'll talk about it February.
You ready?
Yes, sir.
Everybody's ready? All right, so let's see here. It is 6:30. We will call the April 7th Planning and Zoning Commission agenda to order. Before we start, a couple of things. The council decided to record these meetings, so the camera will be on tonight. So when you do make a comment, please turn on your microphones, hit the talk button. When you're done talking, turn them off, or else they all can't come on at one time. So that would be certainly helpful, so it'll show up on the camera. Also, happy birthday, Barb. You're welcome. You and my son are the same age, ironically.
Yeah.
Your son's 80.
Hey.
29. Barb's 21.
Wow. All right, that being said, let's do roll call. Brooks.
Here.
Chuck.
Present.
Brian.
Present.
Thomas.
Present.
Alyssa.
Here.
Rob.
Here.
We have quorum. Item number 3, I would entertain a motion to approve the agenda.
I move to approve the agenda.
Could I make a motion to move item 4.4 to 7.1 and 4.7
3,
to a discussion item?
4.4 and 4.7.
Yeah.
So you want to move 4.4 to 7.1?
Yeah, so can we discuss that after the conditional use application? They're kind of related to each other.
Do you see a problem with that, Brian? With the consent calendar?
No, the plat would be the plat,
Right,
regardless if CUP is issued or not.
sure.
Just rather than
Okay.
ask the same questions on both
Okay.
items, if we could.
And so we'll move item 7 to item, let's call it 13.
Then I just
Oh,
have
man.
We got a 13 in there.
a question on that.
Yeah, that's going to be 14 and that's going to be 15. What's that now?
I just had some question on item 4.7.
Okay, well, that is now 13. So
I moved.
So
with that,
I'll second that with the adjustments.
okay,
I agree.
all right. I will entertain a motion to approve, or we got a motion in a second, I'm sorry. Now I'm all confused. You guys confused me. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. All right, now item number 4, the consent calendar.
I'll make a motion to approve.
Second.
Motion and a second to approve the consent calendar,
As we discussed.
as we discussed, yes. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. You don't have to turn your mic on to do the votes, just when you talk. Item number 5, the approval of minutes of the March 17th regular meeting.
Move to approve.
Second.
Motion and a second to approve. Any discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Item number 6, this is the part of the meeting where we open it up for public comments. So if you'd like to address the commission about anything, you can do so now. Unless you are on the agenda later. Going once, going twice. There we go. All right. Item number 7, conditional use application for 2000 West Frontier Street. 25 Encore Park. Good evening, sir.
Good evening, Wade Beam, Head Construction on Encore Park, 1300 West 57th in Sioux Falls. Yeah, so I actually am going to apologize for having to be here tonight. We're here basically to ask for a conditional use based on something we should have asked for when we changed the density, or went through that density change a while back. But this is a little bit of I'll call it a misinterpretation on my part about what we were going to build out at Encore Park for apartments. So what we're asking for tonight is, we're going to build 300 plus apartments out at Encore Park, kind of regardless of the outcome of the vote tonight. But the way the ordinance reads, your max, we would essentially have to carve up multiple lots. In our 15.67 acre parcel would have to be carved up into multiple lots to accommodate that many apartments. Our preference is to leave it all as one parcel and to build otherwise according to zoning ordinance. So, we're still adhering to all the normal zoning ordinances, max of 55 feet in height and, with the density requirements prescribed and all of those types of things. But again, this is basically allowing us to do it all on one lot rather than multiple lots.
Do you have any preliminary drawings of what it would look like sitting on this lot?
We'll start to plan it based on the outcome tonight. So,
You said 300 plus?
yeah, so according with the 2,000 square foot density requirement, we can build up to, I think the application says 342. By the time we dedicate a little bit of land, it'll be less than that, but it'll be within that 2,000 square foot density. So I think it's going to net out to be about 320 range, which is fairly consistent with everything we've talked about to date.
So I guess I would like to see some sort of drawing before I decide on something tonight. I don't know how quick that can be done, but I think it would be helpful.
Wade, yeah, I guess I would agree with that comment. I'd like to see a preliminary drawing. Also, I know one of the comments on the preliminary plan was, and I think the gentleman is here tonight, was about the extension of, I believe it's Lancer Avenue,
Yeah.
through the north, to eliminate some of the traffic across Frontier Avenue. And and that was one of the reasons why I pulled the item off the consent calendar to after this meeting, was to address the issue of Lancer Avenue not going through Lot 1. So I guess, what are your plans for that parcel? Are you eliminating the road through Lancer across the west edge of that? And what is your plan across, trying to see here, I'm trying to look at 3 different items here on the agenda. It would be Lot 1 of Block 3, where it's now called Odie Trail. Previously it was Industrial Avenue, was going through and connecting to Lancer Avenue, which I don't see that happening anymore. So can you explain the change in your direction, please?
It's not a change in direction, it's just a second phase. Lancer Avenue is still contemplated as running up the west edge of the property. And in how we need to present our DEPs and how we presented our plating, it just wasn't going to be there. There's kind of been an ongoing, I'll call it an ongoing discussion with Xcel Energy about participation in Lancer Avenue. So our preference being a neighboring developer, with another, entity, typically when you put in streets, you want to put them in, centered on a property line. And we're still holding out some hope that we can get Xcel Energy to cooperate with that someday. But so far we haven't. So he said basically the easiest way for us to deal with this right now is to plan for our development to contain all of Lancer Avenue, but we're not going to show the plat. We're not going to show it until we figure out if it's 33 feet on our land or 66 feet on our land. So that's really the only holdup in being able to show it, is just that, hope for some future participation.
I guess I understand your hope, but on our side, it's our expectation
Sure.
that our preliminary approval of this was the understanding that Lancer was going through, that the right-of-way just south of the railroad continued through. So I'm kind of doubling up on two different topics here, and that's why I asked to move the consent item to after this, was what's the city's comments on a dead end on the south side of the railroad? I don't know, Tammy and Paul and.
If I might, before Tammy jumps
Sure.
in, I can address a couple of things. We currently have license agreements in place with the railroad to pass Lancer Avenue across where it's contemplated to run across. As a function of an approval, and whether that's tonight or in a future meeting, you can always place the condition on us that, the condition is that our request can be granted, subject to Lancer Avenue being placed substantially as shown on the original preliminary plans. The preliminary plans that were approved, back at the beginning phases of our development, do show it there, and it's that's it. As these things, these developments do tend to evolve a little bit. I would say ours has very substantially been the same since the beginning. We just had to show things a little different along the way. So we're not trying to do an end around or anything. So whatever mechanisms gets everybody comfortable, we're game. So we just gotta talk it through.
Yeah, I guess with approval of the plat without Lancer Avenue going through, we can't put conditions on it. If that makes sense. So it was on the consent calendar that Lot 4 be approved without Lancer going through. Am I making sense here?
Mm-hmm.
It's my understanding that it was agreed that Lancer Avenue was going to continue through to the north, across the railroad track, connect to what's now called Odie Trail. And I'm not seeing that happening now. And I don't want all of this light industrial traffic to have to go down Heritage in front of the funeral home. I see the gentleman is here representing the funeral home tonight. When the original intent was that some of that traffic would come down Lancer Avenue. So, do you understand where I'm coming from
I
tonight?
totally understand, and I'll defer to staff on how we get there, but it's all consistent with our plan. So it's, again, you kind of, just for the stated reasons, that's kind of where we're at today with it. So
with that, I can't approve the plat if you don't have Lancer going through it.
okay,
Do you see where I'm coming from? And I can't necessarily approve this without Lancer going through. I see you do have a 66-foot right-of-way, or a 66-foot
Yep, it's in there.
for future, but I would like to see that happen now, just so there's a guarantee that that's going to happen to alleviate this gentleman's concern and alleviate my concern that we don't have a lot of dead-end roads, especially within a light industrial district where you've got heavy traffic and, you know, big trucks trying to turn around. I see there is some kind of a cul-de-sac at the end of Odie Trail. I don't know if that meets the intent of really what light industrial is. But when we've got, you know, tractor trailers going through, I hate to see those guys trying to turn around. And the city's, you know, fire trucks having to access and fight fires in a dead-end situation, so.
Sure.
Does staff have any comments on this? Okay.
Just real quick, so the preliminary plans are the ones that were approved by this board and council. That does show Lancer Avenue going all the way to the north, so we are planning for that. The reason why it's not shown on this plan is because they are not improving that section of road with their first phase. So when they come in and they do their second phase, then that road will have to continue across the railroad tracks. So this is set up so that we can do that in the future, but because they're not improving it right now, it's not platted as right-of-way. Does that make sense? So the
Why-
end of, so the
Why
end
wouldn't they
of,
plat it as right-of-way now? Not necessarily having to improve it, but plat it as right-of-way.
because it could move.
Because what?
Because it could move. The hope is that we would skew it just a little bit so that it would be on Excel Energy's land as well. So it would be on that property line, and then Excel Energy would participate in half of the cost of that road. As of right now, they're not willing to do that.
But they're showing 66 feet up against the railway.
Right, but that's not, I mean, in the future, if Excel Energy is not interested in building that road ever, then Hay Construction will have to extend that road, and then we left that amount of space in there, that 66 feet. So when they come in and do their site design, we will definitely look at those setbacks and say that it has to be 66 feet plus their setbacks from that, so that that can be dedicated as right-of-way in the future.
What about access to, there's two lots that are accessed only via right-of-way access along the south side of the railroad. What,
Yep, so that would,
has the fire department weighed in on that?
yes, yep.
And they're okay with that they can't turn around?
So Lot 2 and Lot 3 won't be built on immediately. So that access easement right along the south of the railroad tracks, in their second phase, they're planning for that to be a private road. We have to get utilities through there first, so we don't want them to build that road yet. So we have 2 sewer mains that'll go through there. We just started the one project. They'll start on that construction like on April 13th. And then we also need a redundant line all the way to the city of Sioux Falls to their wastewater treatment plant. And so we'll have to get that in there as well. That's why it's not dedicated as right-of-way yet. It's an access easement.
But the fire department's okay that they can't turn their fire trucks around in a light industrial area?
So as of now, there's nothing planned to be built there, those 2 lots.
Well, regardless of anything being planned to be built there, can the fire trucks get in there and turn their trucks around and be able to fight a fire?
Yes.
Okay.
Is there access to those lots off of Heritage?
Off of Heritage, yes. And then that West Odie Trail, if you see on there, there's kind of a rectangle on there. That's an access easement because they're going to put in a temporary cul-de-sac.
Okay. Well,
And it's
I'm,
not dedicated as right-of-way there just because it's a lot easier to get rid of an access easement later than it is for right-of-way.
all right, I'm gonna have to trust that the city has had communications with the fire department, but that scares me, that we have a dead end that fire trucks can't turn around on.
Which dead end can they not turn around on?
That right away to
south?
access Lot 2,
Lot
From
2.
Heritage heading west?
from
is that what you're
Heritage
talking
to
about?
the west to Lot 3 and Lot 2. Right now, it's a dead end.
Yeah, and there are fire hydrants out there,
Well, regardless of fire hydrants, to
right?
get fire trucks back there and be able to turn around and be able to fight fires.
Chief Dykstra, he is very interested in our reviews and he's very much part of them.
Okay.
So he has reviewed it multiple times, from
Okay.
concept to preliminary to DEPs.
Will that private road extend to the west to Lancer?
No, most likely not. It kind of depends on how that site plan comes back in.
That's my concern, that with Lancer not going through, the initial plan showed it connecting to Lancer, and it's no longer making that connection. So, to me, it's a, if they ever have to respond to a fire on Lot 3 or Lot 2, or even Lot 1, which is now, how many units are you talking about?
300.
320.
320 units, they can only access that from the south side.
So lot 1, there is that access easement that goes through there that, well, it's a drainage and utility easement. I would assume that they'd put some kind of a road through there.
But access to it is different than being able to maneuver. I know, like the city of Sioux Falls, you cannot go down a dead-end road and not be able, you're limited to how far you can go with a emergency vehicle and not be able to do a turnaround.
Right. So they'll have their road that kind of goes through there, it
With
just won't
either
go
a-
all the
a
way to
cul-de-sac or
Lancer.
a hammerhead or some type of turnaround. And I'm not seeing that in this plan.
So when they put in their private road on the south side of the railroad, it'll go from Heritage down across lot 2 and then through, somehow through that drainage and utility easement. We'll let them work out their building size and where all that looks, but they'll be able to loop through there, a fire truck will.
It just won't be on a public road? Well, it
Correct.
won't be on a public road anyway, because it's all a private road, correct? So you're saying they'll have access to lot 1, the development with the apartments on it?
Correct.
It won't really be a dead end, it will be a,
There'll be a private road where they can get in and out.
does that make sense?
I'm not seeing it. If this was private, this would not be allowed.
I guess I'm not understanding that. Lot 2 and lot 3 have not been built on. So
Regardless of whether they're built on or not, the fire department needs to have access to a parcel and be able to get their trucks in, turned around, and back out.
and they will have access because
They'll have
they're,
access too, but I don't see how they can get back out.
so lot,
Most municipalities have a distance how far they can go in without either a hammerhead or a cul-de-sac to turn their vehicles around and get back out.
and Dykstra has told me that's 500 feet. So they'll be able to access lot 2 and lot 3. Once we put our sewer main in there, we are going to have at least a 10-foot wide gravel pathway that they get in there, which is more than enough for them until something is built there.
Okay. As
And
long
then-
as the city and the fire department have had these communications and you're comfortable with
have.
that, then I'm okay, but I'm not seeing that in this, in what's being submitted here.
Right, and it is very much a phased project. They're not done with just this one phase.
Okay. Anybody else have any questions on the conditional use?
If we're going to proceed with it based like this, I can't vote for it without seeing some sort of preliminary plan of how the apartments are going to lay out on there.
Okay,
I'm going to agree with Chuck on that.
okay. Staff have any comments on that?
does phase one lock in where the buildings are gonna sit? Or did that come to phase two?
Nope, those would all be individual site plans. So phase one is really just the infrastructure, the water, the sewer, the streets, storm sewer, street lights, that sort of thing.
So this whole Lot 1, whatever it is, the reason we're listening to conditional use is so they don't have to replot the individual lots, correct? And are they, I don't see them asking to be a PD. So why didn't we go that route?
Conditional use permit's a lot easier than a PD.
Okay. But we're trying to accomplish the same thing.
Correct.
Essentially, we're looking for one change in the way the ordinance is written. It's not a per lot, it's an overall development.
Correct.
So I have a question. So I think I heard you say, Tammy, that phase one is just, there's no buildings in phase one right now. We'll see more information and before buildings go up. Will that come to us again? No.
Normally, we see a preliminary plan, correct? And we already saw that?
Yeah.
We already saw the preliminary plan. But that had it as each building had to be platted off individually and built. Okay.
So then when they sell a lot, then they'll put together a site plan and submit that to city staff. City staff will review it, much like the Dairy Queen we're going through. And if there's anything there, say it needs a conditional use, then it would go back in front of the board. If it doesn't, if it checks all the boxes of our ordinances and zoning board, then we can approve it and then they can go out and build it.
And if this conditional use application were approved, you would still have those controls in place to review them as they come in and build them, make sure they meet all the setbacks, make sure they meet all the requirements. It just saves them from having to replot every lot.
Correct.
And that would be how many lots?
Yeah, I haven't even done
10?
the math, but, let's just say it's 8 or 10 lots,
Okay.
7 or 8 lots, whatever it is. Because then you get into all, the complications of, does every lot have access? And you've got, all kinds of funky easements and everything else that we got to deal with. We've always contemplated this development or this Lot 1 as being a singular lot that has an apartment development on it. It was my late realization based on kind of an opening sentence in the ordinance that just simply read that a lot, a per lot, and it was, I'm kind of lazy, I jump right to the bulk regulations, I don't read the,
Yep.
intro stuff.
Normally, when we do something like that, we call it a plan development, and then you can build the number of buildings on without having to replat everything.
Sure.
Anybody else have any other questions or?
So Tammy, if I understand you correctly, if we approve the conditional use tonight without any conditions, then you would make sure that the buildings sit according to setbacks, all that stuff.
Correct.
If we would approve the conditional use with a condition that we still would like to see where the buildings sit, you would have to do that. But you're not prepared to do it tonight.
Yeah, we just didn't start drawing on it because, it changes. Is it now a 36 unit building or is it a 48 unit building? Is it because that changes.
And that's what I would like to see. I guess if we want to move it forward, that would be one of the conditions I would want to see.
Right. Because normally when we get a preliminary plan, that's what's built. I mean, typically, right? I mean, there's minor changes, but not usually major tweaks to the preliminary plan that we see. So if we already saw a preliminary plan, and there's gonna be changes outside of what that plan is, then yeah, we would probably like to see those.
So all you've seen for preliminary plans has been the development plans.
I guess in my mind, there was more information brought to the prior meeting, and it's pulled from this meeting. So that's what scares me.
Oh,
There was a layout, there was units shown, and all of a sudden those are gone, and that scares me.
okay.
That,
Were those gone because of something that,
and so is there,
We
is there
did,
an
or-
intentional change?
Those were shown when you were talking about the ordinance and changing that. So
So
it
the
was just
intent-
never added to this
Right,
one.
but if the intent is now different, I'd like to see that. And I think, I don't want to speak for Chuck,
No.
but I think Chuck is saying the same thing. We'd like to see what's being proposed here. And I know we had several people respond from the community that they had some concerns. And so when we replatted this to an R2, and there was a proposed plan of what that entailed, and I don't want to see that change.
So you could table it until you have a site plan. Or you could approve it with the condition that we bring a site plan to you for final approval. Can they add?
what was that?
My question would be, if you approved it tonight with the condition that you would see the site plan, could you then add additional conditions onto it after seeing the site plan?
Probably not if we already approved the conditional use.
Right. Wade, do you have objections to them tabling this until you have a concept plan?
Yeah,
Their
I
site
don't,
plan?
I don't, I just gotta start that process. So, again, we've gone through a number of iterations on, what we wanna do with, working on a number of aspects of this development, so, we haven't really focused on the multifamily too much, even to this date, and so, if you wanna table it, that's fine.
Does anybody else have any concerns or thoughts or questions?
I guess in my mind, part of a conditional use is to see what's being proposed,
Yep,
so that the community and the neighbors can react to that. So I'd like to table it until we have a little bit more information.
okay. Would you like
I'll
to
leave
table it,
to
Brian?
others.
I'll second that.
I'd recommend just deferring it
Let's
to the
defer
next
it.
meeting instead of tabling, because then you get into all kinds of Robert's Rules of Order regulations, so just.
And
just
I don't have
defer it
that book.
To the next meeting.
So let's just defer it. How about that? You want to change your motion to deferring?
I'd like to defer it till 2 weeks.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep,
Or until
Yep.
you're done with the drawings, I guess.
Yeah, I'll defer it until, I'd like to make a motion to defer it until the applicant provides a preliminary plan.
Can we go ahead and include 7.1 in that motion for the plat, or can we approve the plat?
I'd like
Hold on.
to include the plat along with that.
Yes, Tammy?
The plat's already approved and filed.
Yeah,
City staff does that. The consent calendar is more of a informational purpose.
right. Okay, so we'll,
Okay.
does that make sense?
If the city and the fire department are okay with that, I have some major concerns about it, but if you guys are okay with it, I'll leave it up to you.
Okay, so we have a motion to defer item number 7 until drawings are provided. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second from Chuck. All right. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Our motion carries. All right, now item 7.1 is the plat of Encore Part Lot 1 through 4. Block 2, lots 1 through 3, Block 3, lots 1 through 2, Block 4, and Tract A. I would entertain a motion to approve or deny. Approve, probably.
Motion to approve.
Motion and a second to approve the plat. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Aye. Motion carries. Okay, item number 8. Thank you, sir. Item number 8, conditional use application, Lot 6, Block 2, Brandon 90 Plaza Addition. Let's see here, hold on. Yes, sir. Hi.
Good evening.
Are you MISD Property Holdings?
I am the attorney for MISD Property Holdings. My name is Nick Mosier. I'm an attorney out of Yankton.
Okay,
If you'd like to know just a little bit about my client, they're a Michigan company, so they're one of these out-of-staters. They're the only out-of-state client that I have. Did a lot of due diligence on them before I decided to take them on. The principal owner is a guy named Tommy Nafso. He's a former prosecutor in the city of Detroit and a former prosecutor in the Michigan Attorney General's office. He's dealt with things like gaming and firearms and alcohol and tobacco. And a couple of years ago, he got out into the private sector and has run and operated, I think, 10 or 12 cannabis medical and adult use facilities in the state of Michigan. I believe there's 8 medical use facilities in the state of Missouri and a pending license in Illinois, along with 3 or 4 here in the state of South Dakota. Really excited about Brandon. I've told him from the beginning this is one of the communities that's a great place to do business, and the location. Not only is it, I think, well suited being right on the interstate, but we were also led to believe that that development is a place that the city would prefer to see these dispensaries. I think they're maybe a little bit out of the way and so have some quality there, but long track record of operating them within the rules and operating them successfully. Would stand by and entertain any questions.
Yeah, one of the things I was concerned about now, you say he's from Michigan. Is there any people on his ownership list that lives here?
Yes, people on the ownership list that live in the state of South Dakota, not in the city of Brandon.
Okay.
And his primary goal after he and I first met and got introduced, and we were talking about where you want these facilities. Do you want them out west? Do you want them in Sioux Falls? I had some locations in the lottery in Sioux Falls, but to me, my advice was to target my South Dakota brain, ESD communities that I think are good to do business in. Brandon, Yankton, Brookings, Madison. Those are kind of the locations that we're looking at. North Sioux City primarily because of its proximity, on the border down there. But, I'll be heavily involved. He has other members of the team, not necessarily ownership, who are South Dakota residents as well, so.
Does city staff have any issues with this conditional use? Have they met all of our,
The application met the requirements for a cannabis dispensary. One of the owners is here and does live here in South Dakota as required by state statute. I think the only condition that I would think would be relevant in this case, since they don't own the property yet and it hasn't been platted, you may want to put the condition on there that the plat's approved and that the applicant purchases the property.
sure. Now, if they don't do that, the license that they were awarded would become nullified?
Correct.
Yeah. Okay.
So no objection to putting the condition on, but it really does already exist in practice.
What happens first? Chicken egg thing.
As far as,
the conditional use, or the purchase of the ownership of the property and the application?
The application, the next step there is for me to complete Form E, I think is what it's called, which then they submit to the state with their state application. But on there, I have to check off if they're in compliance with city zoning code. So the conditional use needs to come before I can complete that, before they can submit that to the state. So I think as long as the conditions are placed on there that they purchase the land is proposed to be platted, and it's platted, I think that would be adequate.
Because we can apply the conditional use, but if this doesn't happen within a certain time period, it's null and void.
Correct.
And we have a contractual obligation to purchase the property once the conditional use is approved. And we will do that.
purchase agreement.
The only downside, maybe for you guys and frankly for us, is we can't see the development. So we're kind of working with the developer. We want to see what else is going in there. We want to see where it's, that'll help us to, put some exact location on where the facility will be. But you could count on probably a 3,500 to 4,000 square foot facility, probably 8 to 10 parking spots. These facilities don't require a lot of parking because people aren't lingering around. It's in and out. It's not a bar or anything like that. So 8 to 10 should be sufficient as far as parking goes.
The other concern that I had, in Title 17, it talks about cannabis. One of the things they want to avoid in the city is having too many of them in one area. Now, within a quarter mile of there, we got approved 3 already, right? 1 across the expressway and 2 on this side.
We approved 1.
We
One
approved one
dispensary.
dispensary so far, which is at the intersection of Ash and Split Rock, just south of the gas station. That's also a cultivation facility in that building. That's
Right.
the old warehouse
Warehouse.
building. The other dispensary that we have is proposed to be located west of Casey's. And then we have another cultivation operation,
Split Rock.
Split Rock, another,
we
2
also-
blocks south of Ash.
We also have one that we approved that's straight down Birch,
Yep,
back in the industrial park, and we also have one that we approved out in Corson.
correct. And those are
Cultivation.
cultivation facilities.
Correct.
Just for your information, I've seen that philosophies different with the different communities. Some have really worked to spread them out and put in buffer zones to ensure that. Some have put in, different buffers that kind of force them all into the same area. So I have seen different views on that in the South Dakota communities, for whatever that's worth.
And looking at the conditional use chapter, if no work is started within 2 years, the conditional use lapses. But the state has more stringent guidelines as far as use of the license, and it has to be in use, I think this year. I can't remember the exact date, but it's more stringent than this.
Sure. Yeah.
So just so I have it straight in my head, we have so far one other dispensary other than this one that is being proposed.
That's been
Correct.
approved. We've
Yeah.
issued 3 dispensaries.
We can have up to 3, we have 1 so far.
We've approved the 3 applications for those dispensaries. One
Yeah.
yet has to submit their conditional use permit
Okay,
application.
yeah.
This is the second CUP.
This is the second.
Yep.
Okay, if we approve a conditional use, does that go with the property? Like if these people would back out, could anybody come in, take that same property and say, there's conditional use on it, I can open a,
Well, I would place the conditional use that the applicant purchases.
With the applicant.
property.
that's what I thought, but I want to make sure I said it to make
Because
sure.
As of now, we have a waiting list of 2 for dispensaries.
Mm-hmm.
So another individual or company couldn't necessarily come in and purchase this property and put a dispensary on it.
It would actually be the people behind us in
Correct.
line and their location that they've submitted that would
Yeah, yeah.
step in.
So they'd have to go back to, and they would have to then, because their applications include locations. So they would have to go back in, and that, to me, would nullify their existing application. So if number 4, this gets complicated, if number 4 wanted to obtain this spot, they would go back down to number 5. And number 5 would move up, well, they're at a different location as well,
Right.
so neither one of those
Yes.
two potential licensees would be able to
Because
utilize the spot.
these licenses are non-transferable. They're not an asset like a liquor license. So, once they stop using it, it goes back to the city,
Correct.
and then it gets reissued again.
Okay, that's what I thought, but I wanted to make sure.
However, as this group, is it really important whether it's this applicant or another applicant? It's about the location. Because the physical attributes of the actual building and site are really out of our control. It's more of a city statute, law enforcement, state statutes, and not really part of our control. Am I understanding that correctly, Brian? When you said, do we want to put a condition on this applicant or another applicant?
Correct. You know, if for instance, the state denies the license for some reason, you know, it wouldn't be that another applicant could go in and use this site, even with a conditional use permit on it,
They'd
because it's site-specific for the cannabis license portion of it.
The whole process would start over again.
Yes.
You'd have to work pretty hard to find restrictions that are more stringent than what the state already has
Yeah.
on them.
Correct.
That's what I'm getting at.
Yeah.
is
Yeah.
If for whatever reason you guys would, you know, this transaction would fail, and another applicant would come in and
It would just
take
start
this
over again.
site, do we want to put that restriction on?
I think it would start all over again. Maybe somebody would want to be out there, but they would have to start the process all over again.
Yeah,
Picking a
this
site,
conditional
getting a
use wouldn't
license.
apply
Yeah.
to anybody else.
Any other questions? Otherwise, I'd entertain a motion.
I'll make a motion that we approve the conditional use with the condition that the applicant named here purchases the property. Is that the staff recommendation? Okay.
I'll second that.
Motion and a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you.
Thank you.
Enjoy your drive back to Yankton.
Yeah, it was very
Very windy. All right, item number 9, conditional use application for 201 South Split Rock Boulevard. Looks like 14 Foods.
Dairy Queen site that was determined
Okay,
needs a CUP because the drive lane on the south side and the east side are in the setback area. So the language says, access aisles and maneuvering in driveway areas primarily utilized by loading areas may be located within setbacks only by conditional use and shall be hard surfaced. So that's
Okay.
what we've got this right here.
So-
And
so this was already in front of us once. They did comply with our parking regulations.
yes, sir,
Yep,
they added the 30 second.
and we do allow this with conditional use in our ordinance. Okay, anybody have any questions, comments?
So probably more of a comment. Sorry.
Let me help you.
And maybe a comment clarification. So I think what's in the drawing is showing a 15-foot setback.
On the south side.
Right, I believe our ordinance is a 7-foot setback, not
If
15.
it's next to residential, that's 15.
Isn't the high school industrial?
Institutional.
Not yet.
Not
It
yet.
is not. And so, does this currently abut parking for the high school?
It abuts their
Drive lane.
north driveway.
That's our property right there.
I'm just trying to visualize where the actual property lines fall.
Ooh.
Pretty close to that curve.
So this falls within the green space there that's shown on the screen.
Has there been any comments from the school or the bank regarding this?
I haven't received any. Actually, does that show? Can you pull the GIS up?
Oh, fancy.
Because there is quite a bit of green space between the school's driveway and the property line. Or what would appear to be.
Yeah, there's the red line.
These property lines are approximate.
So there's 25 feet from the driveway to the property line, give or take a couple feet.
So a question for Paul as AHJ. Do you consider this a loading access or a parking access?
Well, we've discussed that at staff level and with the owner. And it's being classified as loading. I think it'll be both functions. We're going to later in this meeting, going to discuss this ordinance language. Because at some point, the word loading area got added in, and we're going to revisit that to see whether we want to change that or not. Because this has already happened with the RVs, and now it's happening again. So we want to make sure that we don't unnecessarily bring an applicant in that when this could be a normal functioning drive-through or loading area that seems reasonable.
Okay.
So we're going to revisit it later this meeting.
Because if it's parking access, we're okay. It's just if it's loading access, that's where we get into the issue.
Yeah, right. It has to be loading to be part of this. If it wasn't loading at all, then it would not qualify.
But if it was parking, we'd be okay.
Yes, sir.
Yes.
So,
So it kind of serves a duality in this particular situation. It's not specifically loading, it's not specifically parking,
I
correct?
agree with that.
In your interpretation.
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, any other comments, questions? Entertain a motion?
I would entertain a motion to approve it with no conditions.
I'll second it.
Motion and a second. All right, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign, motion carries. All right, now on to discussion items. These are always the really short-term things we do.
Did we address the,
Item 13, we're gonna get there. The other plat?
yes.
It's now item 13, we're on 10. All right, family definitions. Who would like to start this off?
So it's nice to be at the table rather than the audience.
Hi, Patrick.
Hi. So the issue came up that group homes are a sensitive topic, but they're also a federally protected thing, given that they, in this context, it's a group home applying to individuals with disabilities. The federal definition in the Fair Housing Act and the ADA is handicap, so that's why that term is used rather than disability. There's some people that prefer one over the other, but that's why that particular term is used. So this is designed to basically bring things up to date with what federal law requires for group homes. And this is kind of the first stab at that, trying to, and of course that involves modifying the definition of family because of single-family dwelling. So, and I've included kind of a memo, it's the long part with a lot of paragraphs, about kind of where the proposal from the city comes from, why certain things are the way they are, and the VOA is here as well. We've been working with them, and I am interested in their comments. We've generally taken the approach that Brandon is a welcoming community. If you would like to live in Brandon, we will do what we can to make that a possibility. And this is one thing we can do, is bring the group home definition, the family definition up to 2020 and comply with federal law. So that's the starting point on that, and I welcome their comments and input.
Anybody from VOA want to come on up?
Mally Clute, 604 North Oak Ridge Road, also Managing Director for Volunteers of America Dakotas. Certainly appreciate the work of Mr. Andrews and the approach taken to protect the rights of people with disabilities, and therefore the support for organizations like ours that serve individuals with disabilities. We do, again, appreciate the inclusion of group home in allowable use instead of conditional use, and therefore its allowance in the R1, 2, and 3 districts. So that's really our perspective. We appreciate the work of Mr. Andrews and believe that the proposed definitions accomplish essentially what, just in a different approach of what we were trying to propose in the communication that we sent to you all.
So you have read what he wrote,
Yes, we have.
and you are in agreement with it?
Yes, we are.
Okay. Anybody else have any questions for Mally
I have one
or
question.
Patrick or me? Anybody?
So in your proposition, you're talking about a group home of 8 or fewer?
Yes.
You're welcome.
So we understood from our last time being here, and even the last Planning and Zoning Commission meeting, that there was a desire to put a limit on number of people that could live in such setting. Therefore, based on our administrative rule that we have to comply with as a community support provider supporting people with disabilities, and I noted in my letter, that number is 8. The home that we are looking to build would house 6 individuals. Mr. Andrews took a different approach, saying people with disabilities are protected, and who's to say that 6 or 8 or 3, or let's avoid the number and allow people with disabilities to live together in a group home in a residential district.
But you're saying that you can only, you're limited to 8.
We are. And so Mr. Andrews, what he noted essentially is that in that page 84 of your packet, in the group home definition under permitted use, may be subject to additional state and federal requirements. That means essentially if we're going to have a communal living environment for people with disabilities, we have to follow the state and federal requirements thereof. It's that blanket. So we would, by nature of that verbiage, be limited to the 8 under administrative rule of South Dakota.
So, I just want to make sure I understand group homes and what they entail. So 2 questions associated with that. With 8 people, are they supervised? Is that 1 person? Is that 2 people, 3 people? How many administrative people does it take on a day-to-day basis for 8 people is my first question. And my second question, with a group home, does that constitute individual living and sleeping quarters, with I don't know if I'm using the right term, communal living and dining
Thank you.
spaces. I
Yes.
want to understand
Yes.
what your understanding of group home is, and so
Yes.
we're on the same page.
Thank you. I appreciate the question, Mr. Heidebrink. So first question related to supervision. People with disabilities, these living environments are different than a childcare, right? You're probably all familiar with a childcare. There's certain ratios. The younger the child, the more staff you have to have, right? The state ratio is 1 to 6 for childcare if you're supporting infants and toddlers, right? Because they can't care for themselves. For people with disabilities, there is not a required ratio. It's really dependent on the individual's needs. So at various times of the day in some of our homes, we have 2 or 3 or 4 staff based on various schedules, right? Sam needs to go to work and Tom has a doctor appointment and some are staying back at the home to play cards with one another. So in that circumstance, we would staff appropriately to meet their needs. So at this point, we're charged under administrative rule to ensure adequate supervision. There's not a set ratio for these settings like there is in a childcare. Your second question related to the living environment. Home and community-based settings rule falls from Center for Medicaid Services, CMS. That's a federal entity. And within that, I noted in my communication to you all, there are certain requirements that we have to fulfill under being a home and community-based setting. And that includes that they have to have an individual room, they have to have a lock on their door, so they have their own privacy. There is a communal living area, so they will all have their own individual living quarters in the home that we'll be building in Brandon. And then there is that communal living space for kitchen and bathroom, et cetera.
And you said that's you guys doing that, or that's a requirement for the locked doors and the?
That's a requirement from the federal entity.
Okay.
Yes, that's a requirement of the federal entity.
How many bathrooms did you say you were gonna have?
I believe we're going to have 2 bathrooms in this particular house, but it's for 6 individuals. Yes, yes, there will be staff present to provide the needed support so they can live as independently as possible, yes.
When we talk about staff in a facility like this, do we have to consider things like off-street parking, or that'll just be handled in a normal driveway, garage situation?
Correct.
Okay.
Is it 24-hour staff?
Yes.
Yeah. So is there a sleeping quarter then for the staff person? No.
There's
Because they
no
have to
sleeping.
stay awake. 'cause
Correct.
That's,
Yep,
yeah, they're on the
that's
job,
correct.
yeah.
Yes.
But there's office space, there's a room that's an office.
Yeah, there will be some space for the staff to ensure, you know,
So that
their
they have a
comings and
desk
goings.
and-
Yep,
yeah.
yep,
If you can stay up all night, Alyssa, they have a job for you.
that's right.
So, maybe to elaborate on my initial question.
Yes, sir.
Maybe a dual question both to you and administration. So, when we talk about the federal standards, the federal standards state that they have an individual space, which is basically just a living space, which is, I don't know.
A room.
A dorm room. But it's communal bathrooms, communal living space, communal kitchen space, communal outdoor space. They share all of those other spaces other than just a living space, correct?
Yes, that's correct. Yep. They, yes, they have their own space and the rest is shared, and they really do function as a family. And I think I shared this previously, but they celebrate each other's birthdays, they exchange gifts, they go on trips together, they want to go fishing or shopping. They really do operate as a family.
So the last time this came before us, there obviously was some confusion with our definitions. Does this clean it up, in your opinions?
Yes.
In your opinion, does it clean it up?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. The rationale for our proposal to say, essentially, strike the group home language and actually define more specifically the setting, because group home as a whole, and I think Mr. Andrews noted this, right? Like, there's not one consistent, clear definition of group home. And that was part of, I think, the confusion that came before this commission and frankly, city council and concerned citizens was it could mean a lot of things.
It does appear in his
So what
definition.
exactly
Yep.
does it mean? And so Mr. Andrews clarified that in the definition
Yes.
of, we're talking specifically about individuals that have disabilities that live together, but not
Yep.
A, B, C, D, E.
I do see that he included all those in the definition, yes.
Correct.
Is there anything else that anybody would like to add to the definitions? This is a discussion item, so.
I'll let others speak first.
In your letter, you have
Thank you. Like I'm the circus ringleader or something. Good Lord.
I'm used to talking without pushing buttons. You have a list of 5 items that it's not. Not a nursing facility, an institution for mental diseases. So what I get out of that is that these people are not that bad off.
They have intellectual and developmental disabilities, and so we're licensed as a community support provider. The home and community-based settings rule under the federal entity is very specific about what is a home and community-based setting and what is not. And that federal rule identifies that a nursing facility is not. And you all know that, right?
Yeah.
You have a specific ordinance related to nursing homes or long-term care facilities or places like that. And so, yeah, an institution for individuals with mental diseases, that may be what we refer to as a psychiatric residential treatment facility, a PRTF. That's different than being a community support provider supporting people with disabilities in single-family homes.
It was a good letter, I liked it.
Thank you,
Okay.
sir.
Anybody else have any other thoughts on this? We're okay to proceed with the definitions? I would assume on our next meeting, we would have a public hearing on these? No?
No, probably not the next meeting, because we've got publication requirements.
Okay,
So probably the first meeting in May.
okay.
I do have a couple of questions, sorry.
Okay?
You're welcome.
I'm not opposed to this, don't get me wrong, but I do have some concerns. Number one, so our ordinance, and maybe to sway away from the definition first, and our ordinance is about density. And so to apply this to NRC and R1, I have some concerns with. Because NRC and R1, in our definition, is about low density. And I don't know if this is appropriate for 8 to 12 people in an R1 and an NRC when they both specifically talk about low density. That's one concern I have. Number two is within the definition, I understand where you guys come from. You're subsidized by, federal and state subsidies. I don't know if we want to put that as a requirement, because what if a private entity wants to come in and do this? There's private nursing homes, there's other private settings, and to put this just on a subsidized, to limit it only to subsidized, to me, eliminates the same thing from a private setting. Would you have
I get it.
would you be opposed to that?
No.
That we
I
change
think
the definition to eliminate the,
from Medicaid,
yes,
essentially saying group homes for any and all home and community-based services may be subject to additional state and federal requirements.
Yeah.
You'd essentially just strike the funding source language in the
Right.
definition.
I want to take the business side of it out of this, because
Yep,
to me, that's
understood.
not what the zoning ordinance is about. zoning
Understood.
ordinance is about density.
Correct.
And I don't know if the ordinance really cares if it's privately funded or publicly funded. Correct?
And that funding could change over time also.
Exactly, yeah. So I wouldn't want to constrict it to just a subsidized funding source.
As far as density goes, we don't limit the number of children that can live in an R1 house. If a family wants to have 13 kids and live in a house in R1, they certainly can.
Right.
It'd be a little tight, but they certainly can. We don't limit that. I mean, I get the density thing, that's why I kind of asked about the vehicles and the parking requirements. But I'd think that density, I think we would be okay, especially if they're only talking about 6 residents. Is that correct?
Yeah.
I think she said 8.
8.
We specifically the house is for 6.
Okay.
But
to
under
8.
state administrative rule, the number is 8. Otherwise, they consider it an institution or a facility, and it's not a community-based setting.
Correct.
So, and then I guess my third comment is, these are very specific, these aren't residential facilities.
Correct.
No differently than a daycare or a nursing home. And so if this entity was to move out and move to a different location, a larger location, we now have a facility that it's a very specific building
It's going to.
that has no reuse if they were to leave. And so if this was in an R1 or an NRC or an R2, what happens if this entity was to, okay, I'm going to move out of here and move into another location? What happens with this property?
I would think any purchaser would have to remodel.
With all due respect, sir, this is a home, and it's going to look like a home. It's going to have a 2-car garage, and it's going to be a home with bedrooms. There's no signage. We cannot have signage. It's not a facility. It's a home. And so if there's someone that's looking for a 6-bedroom home, then they would be able to buy it if we would vacate the property for some reason in the future as a single-family home. Or potentially another provider looking to provide services to people with disabilities.
So it is built like a single-family home, so it's like a 6-bedroom house.
Like a home, exactly.
Yep.
There is no
Okay.
facility, there is no signage, there is no, it will blend very well into the neighborhood. When we
Oh,
look
I
at the
understand.
proposals and pricing, this is a very, very expensive home.
Yep. Patrick, did you have
I
something?
understand, no, I'm not trying to contradict what you're doing, but what our ordinance allows could be something different. What you guys do may be, yes, it might be a residential character, it might be compatible to switch over to that,
Understood.
but it doesn't eliminate a business type of facility to be constructed.
You mean, you're talking about if somebody besides them came in and built a facility,
Yes.
they would make it look more institutional?
An example would be the School for the Blind and Visually Impaired in Aberdeen,
Okay,
which is a similar situation where they have private rooms for visually disabled people. They share a communal kitchen, they share a communal living space, they share a communal recreational space. It's a little bit larger facility,
Sure.
but it's a commercial type of facility. So I'm just concerned of a commercial type of facility being built in a residential neighborhood.
can we dictate that with our ordinances? I mean, we can't really determine what a house looks like, per se.
We kind of defaulted to, as long as it complies with building codes.
Right. I mean,
So a lot of the portion about Medicaid in the description, we included a may, just because you may run into those situations, as you mentioned, where it is a complete private entity with no federal or state funding. That that's a possibility as well. The funding would be entirely private. The issue there comes in if you have to, it's kind of discriminatory treatment. Would you treat a handicapped person that lives in a medicated funded group home worse than one that lives in a private, or vice versa? So it's kind of a discriminatory treatment issue, as well as the ADA and the Fair Housing Act requires reasonable accommodations and modifications. So absent the Medicaid language in South Dakota, it caps at 8, but a private facility, say they need 10 to make it a viable business operation. Would you be required under fair housing to make that reasonable accommodation? Arguably, yes. That's why there's no solid number in the group home definition amount of people, just because it is federally very complicated, and it's a very strongly worded federal statute that, as Tim kind of said with the definition of family, you could have a family with 8 teenagers with each having a car, and that might be no different. It gets complicated when you get to reasonable accommodation and modification. There's a whole process. I have done a lot of reading in the last 3 weeks, and what's on page 87 is a very preliminary thing, but we'll have to look at a process for that as well. It would work different from a variance just because of the standard, and whether that would be approved administratively by whoever becomes the zoning administrator, potentially myself, or if it would go to a process before you all. It's things that we are federally required to do. And so far, it's not in here, but we are making our best effort to make sure everything's covered.
Okay. Anybody else have anything else? Otherwise, we haven't made any changes that I've heard of, so sounds good. You're very welcome.
And this is a complicated area, so if anyone does have suggestions, we are learning together and we are open to them.
Thank you. Okay, moving on. Item number 11, commercial kennels distance requirement. 91.
So there's a lot in the packet. It's close to 40 pages. A lot of it is, I looked around and tried to find what other places are doing. A lot of them kind of went the way that the recent amendment did, that it's a conditional use, but others have separation distances. The example that I put together starting on page 91, in the bulk of that is the item number 6, kind of like we did with the institutional district, how the setback increases by the height of the building. This is just kind of another way to do it. Since I didn't find this particular example anywhere, but I figured I would throw it out there just because what's right, what's wrong, it's kind of what you come up with. This was, depending on how you said it, the concern seems to be the amount of animals would generate the more noise, so this would increase the setback above your base setback by whatever X amount based on simultaneous animals outside. And that's just an example, but everywhere does it a little bit differently and has a lot of definitions, and this is a starting point for discussion, so we'll see where it takes us.
Okay. Anybody have anything?
On page 93, I see you have, well, starting on 92, and you have definitions for animal hospital, grooming service, specialty services, household pet store, and veterinary services, but I don't see a definition for a kennel.
Correct, that was just based on if we kept the kennel definition the same. So it wasn't changing.
We already have one.
Pardon me.
With the addition of all these definitions, does that remove or add anything to that definition we already have? Because I know it was rather lengthy.
Not so much. Those were mostly, the animal specialty services thing comes from as part of number 6. The additional setback requirements apply to animal specialty services, so it would potentially apply to everything, including there, so long as these pets are simultaneously kept outdoors. So it would be any of those businesses. The key was outdoors versus indoors and the amount at one time, but otherwise, the definitions are just kind of thrown out there in case you wanted to set different setbacks based on the use type or wherever you wanted to take it. Those were just kind of examples. So it's mostly throwing a lot at the wall and seeing where you want to take it.
I don't see anything here about the contention about the distance from a kennels to a residence. Is that on one of the pages?
This does not have particular distances to, some of them do. In some of the examples you'll find it's the long blocks of stuff. I think there was one that talked about distances to residence versus business. So this one is, I tried to give you a spattering of options. This one was kind of a hybrid option where all businesses that are all other uses have setbacks, and then the extra would apply to animal-based businesses. But there's a lot of ways to do it. I'm just trying to basically information dump you.
So I got a question for everybody up here. So we're considering these changes based on comments that have been heard the last few weeks. Are we making the assumption that we didn't do our job when we did the conditional use? Because if that's the case, I don't agree with that. I thought we did a good job on placing conditions on this.
I agree, I thought so too. As far as number of feet between this and that, I'm not sure that's the right way to go about it. Now, a dog's bark can carry quite a ways, more than 100 yards. I think it might be more important how many dogs are outside at one time. Now, did we put that as one of our conditions on, I can't remember the name of the place, Barks and Rec, yeah. Did we put that as one of the conditions? I thought we didn't, or I don't remember if we did or not. In a story in the Brandon Valley Journal, it said that we said 2 at a time, but I don't remember that. So now I'm asking, what condition did we put on it?
I think it was just supervised when they were outside. I don't
With no number of dogs. Okay, so now I think like a private citizen could have 3 dogs in the yard all day long. That's so that, and they may or may not bark. So to me, it makes sense, maybe 3 at a time would be reasonable. But I thought we put a condition of how many could be outside at one time, but then last meeting, somebody said no, but then in the paper it said 2, so now I'm confused about that.
So am I.
I think the owner mentioned that she would only have 3 at a time out there because of the staff. They would have 1 staff person out there, and they couldn't handle more than 3 at a time. If I remember right.
Yes.
So we're going around the mulberry bush again. But my understanding of why we made this a conditional use was because we can't consider kennels all to be the same. That's my understanding of why this became a conditional use, because every kennel is different. Some kennels are, you put the dogs outside in a They each have their own dog house, they each have their own dog run in their own fenced area. That's one type of kennel. Another type of kennel is all indoors, and then you have everything in between. And that's my understanding of why we chose to do this as a conditional use. And please correct me if I'm wrong, so that we could look at them on a case-by-case basis. Unfortunately, we got a lot of negative feedback on that and requests to, I don't know what the right word is, but regulate kennels. And in my mind, if we need to regulate kennels, we need to, let me rephrase that. We need to regulate animal facilities, not just kennels. Whether it's a boarding kennel, whether it's a veterinary place, whether it's a grooming place, whatever it is, any place with animals that are housed there. And so this is not just a one and done type of an application. It's a multitude of different levels, different strategies of how you accommodate those animals, whether they're indoors, whether they're outdoors, whether they're supervised, unsupervised. And so in my mind, if we're going to approach it that way, I don't think we can just say a one and done type of situation. That's my opinion. My opinion is if they're inside, I don't care. I don't care if they're next to another business. I don't care if they're next to another residence. We have a lot of general business occupancies that create noise. We have a lot of other general business occupancies that create traffic. We have a lot of other general business occupancies that create other things that may or may not be even known to the adjacent neighbors. But when they're indoors and they're quiet and unobtrusive to the neighbors, it doesn't really matter. It doesn't matter if they're making copies. Doesn't matter if they're on phone calls. Doesn't matter if they're manufacturing things. Doesn't matter if they're animals, as long as they're not obtrusive to the neighbors. Now, that's one side of the story. The other side of the story, if they're outside, that's another thing. If they're supervised, how many of them, that's a different animal. But I thought the intent of a conditional use was that we could look at them on a case-by-case basis. Are they inside? Are they outside? Are they outside only temporarily? Are they outside supervised? And that's why we did it as a conditional use, to look at it as on a case-by-case basis.
It also allowed this board to place conditions upon whatever business was applying. So, yeah. Does anybody else have any questions, thoughts?
I agree with what Brian said. I think he said it very well. That's
Okay.
why we did it.
Okay.
I agree with what Chuck said too, that I thought we did a good job of what conditions we put on this previous applicant. We could do that on any future applicant. I don't have a problem with splitting out these various definitions, just in case that maybe comes up.
So I will
that's-
say,
yeah.
the definitions did not exist before, correct? We did not have all of these defined in our ordinances, so that's new.
I believe so, yes.
So the other question I have for us to think about, if we put in distance requirements, just blanket, are we essentially saying we don't want you in the city limits at all? I mean, if that's what we're doing, let's say it.
Yeah, as I said, I don't think that distance requirements would necessarily fix what some of the objections were. If they said, oh, I don't want to listen to dogs bark, well, how far away do you have to be before you can't hear dog bark? What different, the wind changes, so I'm not sure that distance requirements are going to really help that at all.
Yeah, I don't know if I could sit up here and allow any facility to have unsupervised dogs, I should say animals, unsupervised animals sitting outdoor 24/7 to do as they will, anywhere in town. We're not that big a town that even in our heavy industrial, are they going to be far enough away that we can just let animals go unsupervised and make noise? So, and I thought that was the intent of it being a conditional use, was to look at them as on a case-by-case basis, and what are they doing to eliminate the hazards and implications to the adjacent neighbors. And I know on our agenda is some other things about notification of neighbors, and I think that's all in good due diligence to make everybody aware of these potential projects or applications.
Okay, so is anybody in favor of putting these definitions into our ordinances? Or not?
I think the definitions that are listed are a positive step and in the right direction, and in the future, we might want to hone them a little bit. But
Yeah.
as I see them right now, I think they could be accepted.
So we add basically 6 definitions to our ordinance.
Right.
Are we all right with that?
I guess, Tim, I would, just to maybe alleviate some of the concerns from the public side, if we had a definition of an indoor kennel with supervised outdoor, when the animals are outdoors, that they're supervised, versus a unsupervised facility, and that we do not allow unsupervised kennels or boarding or whatever within,
City limits?
well, I don't know if I want to say city limits. At some point in time, we may grow big enough that we can allow it, but I would not allow them I would not want to see them within a general,
So what you would
within a
like,
business district.
you would like to add this list to our ordinance and then also add another kennel definition?
Well, maybe I should qualify that we don't allow outdoor unsupervised kennels within general business. Not only because of an impact on residential, but an impact on other businesses.
But I believe we would have to then define that, what you just said.
Right.
We would have to
But I
define
think
the
that
difference
might
between,
address some of the concerns from the
Yep.
public.
but we would have to address the difference between an interior and exterior kennel facility.
Right.
So we would have to add basically 2 more definitions. You got that, Patrick?
As is the case with the other definitions, we would also have to assign them potentially to the permitted and conditional use list. If we
Yes.
define pet store, we'd have to put it somewhere as either one of those and which district. And we could modify commercial kennel to be entirely indoor commercial kennel, some that allows exterior, make those 2 separate uses. However you want to do it. There's a way to do it. It's finding the right way to do it.
Okay.
I'm here to take the ideas and hopefully we'll come up with something.
You do great.
I would agree with Brian, we need to add some more language to the definition so that they're not kennels just outside, not unsupervised.
Okay. But we're also good with the definitions that currently exist here. Or would you like to change any of those, or would you like to think about it until we readdress this again?
I think it's a holistic approach.
Yep,
So I think definitions along with potential changes to the ordinance.
yep. We like definitions.
Yeah.
I mean, we can have a ton of definitions, but if they don't apply, then
Yep.
let's not incorporate them.
But we do have to define them first
Yeah.
and then apply them.
As-
If
as
that
long
makes
as-
sense.
As long as we understand the intent of what
Yes.
we're trying to do, so.
Okay, we good? Anyone else have anything else? No? Okay. Item number 12, off-street parking loading areas.
This is a shot at what we talked about earlier with the Dairy Queen, the loading and the parking difference. So it's a first stab at that. Admittedly, I did not have as much time to hammer this one out because I was neck deep in reasonable accommodation and ADA and fair housing for the last few weeks. But so that's what it's designed to do. You may see ways we can improve it. The thought is that A relates to parking and 4 relates to parking, 5, 6, and 7 relate to loading areas. The goal is kind of if the parking is conditional use, the access aisle to it is as well. If it's a permitted use, then the access to it is permitted, and the same with loading. That's where the unless stated otherwise in 4 comes from. I kind of going back and forth between unless a lower standard is required or a different standard or, playing around with the language, but this is what came out for better or worse, so I am open to your comments.
Well, you got anything? I left my law degree at home, so.
I think it's a start. We may have to tweak it as time goes on, like we did with signs, but.
Oh, don't say things.
Those problems come up, yeah.
Well, take a look at it between now and the next meeting, if you have any ideas or tweaks that you'd like to see, give us a call and we can adjust. And then if you like this, then, we'll schedule it for a hearing probably in May.
I like how Patrick described it. How you put that in words is always
That's the challenge.
more difficult.
Oh,
In my
man.
mind, as Patrick said, public and worker parking and access to that is one thing, and loading and trash and service, I'll call it service type of access of functions and access to that are to me are different. And do we want to consider them the same, or do we want to consider them different? In my mind, that's the big question. Because worker and public parking is a day-to-day thing. The service side of it, the loading, the trash, those types of functions are more of infrequent use. And do we consider them the same, or do we consider them different? To me, that's the big picture here.
Would you ever want to require a different driveway or a different access or road or entrance for delivery trucks and garbage trucks? Or is it okay with you if they'd use the same driveway or entrance or exit as customers?
It'd be hard to,
I think you'd have a hard
Yeah.
time finding lots that would accommodate that every time for,
Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
Yeah, remember we had a conversation a while ago, that we're trying to encourage joint accesses and driveways.
yes.
So we would prefer that the delivery trucks use the same driveway as parking. We're trying to restrict access, primarily on Split Rock and some of our other collector streets. So we'd like to encourage folks to use those setbacks as access aisles. so that we can accommodate those joint driveways.
But I think the way the ordinance is written right now, we do allow some latitude, maybe is the right word, for the service, the loading, the access to loading, the access to trash, more so than we do for day-to-day parking for public and employees, correct? So do we want to continue that, to give them a little bit more latitude for the infrequent use for service? Or hold them to the same standards as we do for public and worker parking?
I mean, as far as variances, or as far as setbacks and stuff?
Yeah,
is that what you're talking about?
Am I capturing that correctly, Brian, Patrick?
I think so.
Okay, somebody take all that and put it in words that we can publish. How about that? Got that, Patrick? No problem, right?
I'm working on it.
Yeah, it's awesome. Okay. Let's move on to item, what I've got as 13, which is the plat of Westview Estates, track 5B and 8. Brian, you had a question.
Let me go back to that. What page is
Page
that on,
20.
Tim? Thank you.
20.
So, sorry, get my mic again. I think I brought this up at the last meeting. My one question with that is access to, I'm still trying to get to that sheet here. Page 20, sorry, I went too far back. Basically, my question is to the access to, it would be tract 6. So as you come down North Woodland Court, as you come off East Redwood Boulevard, it says mutual access and utility easement. You come around the curve, it talks about access and utility easement, and then it changes to strictly utility. So at what point do we transfer from access and utility to strictly utility and drainage? Because we need, in my mind, we need to have public access to tract number 8 because it's not accessible off Redwood. So if they hire a lawn service or whatever, how do they access that parcel without going through somebody's property? I just want to clarify that we have public access to that mutual property legally.
So track 6 is these, I don't know what they have, fourplexes. They have access off of Sioux. What we're re-platting is this area right in here. And so this track here has access off of this kind of turnaround here. And then it has this little area right here that's still taken care of by the HOA. So it looks a little bit funny, this little piece right here.
So that little stem right there,
This is, yep, this is still an access easement right through here.
Okay.
So that's how you get access to track 8. And the reason why they're platting off tract 8 is a drainage way, and so they're dedicating that to the city.
okay. I just want to clarify that area all the way back to tract 8
Right.
on Woodland Court is access
Yes.
easement.
Yep,
Okay.
this is
Thank
access
you.
all the way back here.
Okay. Because that's the only access to that parcel because there's nothing off of it.
Right, so eventually we'll have to replat this tract 3A in here because that's also drainage. And it's up for debate on if the city owns that yet or not. We're still working through some of that. We think we own it.
All right.
Others have said otherwise, but we're working on getting all of those kind of cleaned up and dedicated this
Right.
year. So that's kind of where this plat comes from.
I just want to make sure they can get a lawnmower or weed sprayer back there in the future. Yep.
Yep.
Okay, thank you. So as long as we can maybe add a note that that access goes back to tract 8 on the plat, that would be beneficial, just to make sure we don't run into something 10, 20 years down the road. Thank you.
No, we need a motion to approve. Would you like to make that?
I would like to make a motion to approve this based on the access easement extending back to tract 8 along North Woodland Court.
Is that all right? Motion and a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. A rezone applications mailing requirement, the next discussion item, page 135. Okay. Brian,
So this
Patrick,
feeds off of that
Somebody?
same 300 feet notice requirement, since it, technically both a rezone and a text amendments, they are both amendments. That's why this kind of separates out the first paragraph in each section. One applies to the city council, and one applies to P and Z. The first paragraph applies to both, and the second applies to just changes of zone. And the changes of zone are where the 300 feet notice comes from, just because if you applied that to a text amendment, you'd be notifying everyone in town.
sure. Okay.
So the 300 feet applies to any time a rezone comes in, it would go from within feet of the property. So I would interpret that as you measure from the exterior of the property line of the property subject to the rezone 300 feet, and if there's any portion of the neighbor's property in that, then they get a notice.
Okay. I do think that probably does what we wanted, which is to send out targeted letters. I would assume. Is everybody okay with that? Sweet. Last item, number 15, building permits. Paul, have you been busy? I mean, you could do more. I mean,
Half as many houses so far this year as last year. And look, did I see that right? Yeah, yeah.
are we running out of lots?
There's still one, sir. Did you want to build a home?
Just asking. It seems like we're getting close to running out of lots. They're running out of lots too? Oof. Okay.
Commercial standpoint.
Do we have lots for commercial?
Well, yeah,
Yeah.
obviously we have residential, you get your real estate, but commercial brings in.
Oh, yeah. We have commercial lots. You want to build a building? Oh, okay.
Well, if or when that new grade school on the east side starts to go up, we'll get a lot of houses out there.
There's a lot to do before that, though.
I state the obvious again.
Okay, anybody have any questions about the building permits besides my ridiculous comments? Okay,
I'd make a movement to adjourn.
motion, movement, we'll take either one.
Yeah. Not a movement, a motion.
Anybody got a second? Second. Awesome. Motion and second to adjourn. All in favor, say aye. Aye. We are adjourned at 8:17.
It's getting late.